Tourism is Hawaii's top moneymaker, and for 25 years, the Hawaiʻi Tourism Authority has been tasked to market and manage our largest industry. But after hitting a tipping point, there's been a push to change how the state attracts visitors. Despite efforts by HTA to adjust its focus, lawmakers have cut funding, with some calling for the agency to be dissolved. We'll discuss the future of the Hawaiʻi Tourism Authority on tonight's live broadcast and live stream of insights on PBS Hawaii.
Aloha and welcome to Insights on PBS Hawaii. I'm Daryl Huff. The Hawaiʻi Tourism Authority was established in 1998 by the legislature and is charged with marketing and managing the state's largest industry. The agency also helps to fund dozens of programs and events each year that are enjoyed by both tourists and residents. But after a record 10.4 million visitors traveled to Hawaii in 2019, many residents said that was too many, with painful impacts to our quality of life and our natural environment. Now, with residents' complaints still ringing in their ears, lawmakers are seriously considered doing away with HTA. We look forward to your participation in tonight's show. You can email or call in your questions, and you'll find a live stream of this program at pbshawaii.org and the PBS Hawaii Facebook page. Now to our guests. John DeFries was named the president and CEO of the Hawaiʻi Tourism Authority in 2020. Born and raised in Waikiki, he came to the job with more than 4 decades of professional experience in the tourism and resort development industries. Democratic Representative Natalia Hussey-Burdick serves District 50, which covers Kailua and a portion of Kaneohe. Born and raised in Kailua, this freshman rep is the vice chair of the House Tourism Committee. Chun James has been a resident of Oahu's North Shore since 1975. She's a residential real estate broker, an organic farmer, and a longtime community advocate. And Keith Vieira is a principal at KV and Associates Hospitality Consulting. Born and raised in Hilo, he began his long career in the tourism industry in 1981 and was with Starwood Hotels for more than 3 decades. Actually, we were just chatting, and I didn't realize you were on the early boards of HTA. What was the concept back then when you got started? What were you trying to accomplish?
We had about 10 years of stagnant growth in visitors, and Governor Cayetano had recognized that unless we find some way to manage growth going forward and having dedicated funding, because every year we would go to the legislature and beg for $5 million or $10 million in marketing dollars, whatever it was. And so he said, let's put together the TAT, the accommodations tax, let's help fund the convention center, and let's fund ourselves in marketing. It made a lot of sense, and it had a good start going into it, but it's got hijacked by legislators who have taken all the money now, and so we have some challenges going forward.
Speaking of legislators, Natalia Hussey-Burdick, what is it that you've heard from the public this year that has made lawmakers really take a hard look at HTA?
It really started more with the pandemic. That was the first time in decades that we had actually had an opportunity to enjoy the beaches by our house without being literally back to back against 10s, 20s of visitors. So there was kind of an outcry from that point forward, and there had already been people like Chun James who had been advocating for better tourism management before then. And so I'm excited to see the legislator is very serious about it this year. They've created a whole new tourism committee in the House, whereas normally the tourism committee is adjoined with some other subject matter committee. So taking it very seriously this year, and I'm looking forward to what makes it out of conference.
So John DeFries, is HTA still relevant? You know, in a world of social media where everybody knows not only where Hawaii is and what it's like, but also all the hidden places. I mean, what do you see HTA as becoming?
Probably even more relevant today because of all those factors you named. A big part of managing the destination is how we message to the world prior to their arrival here in shaping not only the beauty and the magic of the islands, which is well known, but also what's expected of that visitor when coming to our islands. We ended 2019 with that record number, 10,000,004. By July of 2020, arrivals were hovering around 0, right? And so to Natalia's point, the community felt like we got our islands back, right? There was a certain euphoria about this. I'm on Kalakaua Avenue in August of 2020 at 9 p.m., not a moving vehicle in either direction. Next morning on the beach, completely empty, right? So, but at the same time, those of us in business knew that that bordered on being a sugar high because the economic collapse was going to injure people, injure families. And so this recovery is still moving through phases that I believe HTA is critical to remain in the role that it's in.
June James, as a longtime advocate and as Natalia Hussey-Burdick mentioned, someone who's been talking about tourism management for a long time from the lens of your community, where do you see HTA being? I mean, what would you hope for that? Assuming it survives, what do you think they should be doing?
I think that for us residents, not just in my community, but throughout the Hawaiian chain, we want solutions. We think that you can change the name, or you can change some new demands, but to us, the problem with tourism does not just rest squarely with HTA. HTA has actually done such a good job that the 10 million people coming a year. So the underlying complaints is that is carrying capacity, is the quality of life, is the traffic congestion, is a whole slew of things that cannot rest squarely on HTA. So if we really want to solve the problem of over-tourism and the citizens' quality of life, we need to really get to the root of the problem, and that's carrying capacity being the big one, and then of course preserving our environmental resources.
Let me ask Natalia Hussey-Burdick, is there anything happening in the legislature that would literally limit the number of tourists that could come?
No, and we're actually prevented from doing that by the Interstate Commerce Clause. The U.S. Constitution says that only Congress has that exclusive authority. So I don't think we'll be seeing any kind of calls for that. What we're trying to do is really mitigate the impacts, especially on the communities that have been most negatively impacted, and better management, which really means things like reservation systems and better planning for people, for the visitors when they come, so that they know, maybe this is not a good time to go to this attraction that's super busy around these times, that kind of thing.
Let me ask Keith, you mentioned that the birth of HTA was at a time when people felt there weren't enough tourists. Now people think there's too many. I want to, Tom from Pahoa asks, why are we spending $34 million? I think we're spending more than that. But
Yes.
why are we spending that much to advertise this place? Everyone in the world knows about Hawaii. This place is overrun by tourists. How do you, as a tourism marketing person, how do you see dealing with that? I mean, can you discourage people from coming through marketing?
No, and we don't want to discourage people from
So
coming.
what's the art of marketing?
First, I want to just comment on what you said about visitors, paying for different things. Visitors have no issue with that, and the industry supports that. If you go to a function, you go to a natural resource, whatever it is, you're going to go in, you'd want to go on your phone and get a parking space. You'd want to go when, okay, between 10 and 12 is my reservation time. This happens across the U.S. in the national park, so that makes a lot of sense. And that money has to stay with that event. But to answer your question on visitors, 2009, we had 6.3 million visitors. We had 63,000 hotel rooms, timeshare, and condominiums that are in that market. 2019, we had 63,000 hotel rooms, timeshare, and condos that are in that market, and 10.4 million visitors. Where do those 4 million come from? They're staying in primarily illegal accommodations. Some are legal, and they should be all legal if they're going to be in it. And what do? They go to Costco, they go hiking, biking, they're at the beach all day, they're using natural resources. Nothing wrong with that, but that's a very different visitor from the typical resort visitor. So we'd like to see more emphasis be on what John does, is driving the more typical resort visitor. And this is not about sending people into hotels. This is about getting a visitor who spends money when they're here and does the things that we're set up to do and not be continually hiking the beaches.
Let me okay, John, what tools do you have for really managing it from HTA's point of view? HTA can't set up a fee at a park, or you can't set a contract. That HTA is the marketing wing.
HTA's, if you look at the voyage of the visitor, right, and all the jurisdictions they run, They land on state airport under federal auspices. They get on a state highway, a county road, check into a private landowner, right? So the ability to manage tourism goes back to what Chun was saying about the different jurisdictions being coordinated, being convened, and coming up with solutions. And that's the value of the destination management action plans that have been put together. There is now the initial framework and infrastructure to get these solutions done. HTA's function is to coordinate that, and in order to get that done, it needs to be resourced and funded properly.
Chun James, in terms of, would it be okay, do you think, for communities if you had that kind of control level on access to these resources for tourists? Do you think that's a solution?
I think that we need to recognize and accept that not every inch of the Hawaiian Islands have to be invaded and intruded. Mm-hmm. So for example, recently we have Waimanalo, we have Kailua, we now have Hauula and Kokololio, who are saying that, hey, we want our beach back. We have been just overtaken. You know, they do not want to see another Waikiki in the district. So in that sense, like he says, that there have got to be much more coordination and consistency. You know, we're talking about trying to stop illegal vacation rentals. But then on the other hand, on the city level, there's a built-in that's going to allow creation of community hotels in residential neighborhoods. So a lot of things just do not jive, and I think that there is really a need, you know, whether it's HTA or not, even though I have an opinion on that, there's got to be a better coordination up and down the food chain.
Let me bounce that off of Natalia Burdick. Is there something in the legislature that does that makes it more cohesive? Because I think that is an issue, right? You've got what the county is doing with that Chun James mentioned, which is banning commercial activities, and their state parks is identifying places where you could limit tourists and charge them money. There's the visitor fee that's coming. What management issues or tactics are in your court right now?
Yeah, I think that's really the driving force behind the impetus of changing Hawaiʻi Tourism Authority into a destination management agency. Is we need that kind of administrative power to coordinate all of the different stakeholders involved, to streamline everything and tell us what we need, and to make sure that things are followed through at every level.
You know, John DeFries, I just want to throw this question out there because it's cute. David from Diamond Head, if all the legislators want to discourage tourism, who do you think will pay for the rail to nowhere?
You do know they take $50 million from TAT and give it to rail, even though we're 20 years away from that.
So they are funding rail.
Yes, they are.
Right.
And the property taxes of the hotels are helping fund.
And let me make a point. Keith pointed out earlier that TAT exceeded $1 billion, okay?
That's the hotel room tax.
Yeah. And we're in pursuit of a $75 million ask and 11 million.
What are you going to do with $75 million?
Wait, hold on a second. So round it out to 100 million, okay?
Okay. What do you do with $100 million?
No, we'll go to work on our end, but what I'm saying is take the remaining amount of TAT and in daylight, appropriate it so that the community can see and have tangible evidence that X percentage is going to natural resources, X percentage is going to public education, X percentage. If you sweep that whole 900 million into the general fund, it's very difficult for the community to appreciate the value that it's bringing. HTA doesn't have to be part of that appropriation process. That can be left completely to the Capitol. And that way people would be able to understand the value that tourism is actually bringing in.
Is there something like that in the works? I mean, we are seeing TAT being sort of cannibalized by various needs. The county's got 3%, and then, as Keith mentioned, the rail got a little bit, and then, you know, as John's mentioning, HTA wants some, but then there's other sources, right? So, what do you see in terms of that? Let's see help the public see how much money is coming in and see the benefit.
You may be asking a question that's a little bit above my pay grade. Not on the finance committee, so I don't deal with the allocations of the.
Well, just how do you feel yourself? I mean, do you feel like that the TAT needs to be identified as a source that is actually benefiting people as opposed to just going into a big bucket?
Yeah, I think most of our special funds, they need to show some kind of a nexus between the money that's coming in and the things it's being spent on. So I think part of the TAT purpose, though, was that it could benefit our, you know, public libraries, things like that, so that it
not
benefits
initially,
the
but
public.
no.
So let me ask, so Keith, how much do we really need to spend marketing Hawaii anymore?
About 150 million.
Why so much? I mean, it just
Because
seems like there's...
we're sold by the distribution system. Costco, Pleasant Hawaiian, consortia, retailers, AAA of Southern California has 59 million members. They want to do co-ops. And so if we deal a deal with them that says, here, come to Hawaii for Merrimack, or whatever it is that is the marketing, that money goes to them to help them market. Then industry comes along and does the call to action. Come and stay at our 800 number or our this or whatever. So it's a system that has been very successful. Mexico does 232 million. Now with all the problems they have in Mexico, that's going to go up. The Caribbean does 125 million. What we've been suggesting is take a percentage, dedicated funding of the TAT, and let's just say it's 15% or it could be 10%, whatever the number is, of the billion. Right, and then that way, if John does his job and we get more visitor spending and more taxes, their amount goes up. If John doesn't do his job, the number comes down or we get rid of John. But you gotta have some base. I mean, Coca-Cola, Nordstrom's, everybody has to go after customers.
How do you respond to that idea that we should be spending triple digits, millions of dollars to market Hawaii?
You know, I don't mind those figures because you need to make investments. You know what they say, you need to use money to make money. But I'm actually, at this point, I'm actually more interested in the legislative efforts right now. So from what I understand, I read through all the bills, pretty much all the bills, is that they want to repeal HTA. And I am actually questioning that because it seems like a knee-jerk legislation. Yes, you know, people are complaining, we're complaining, but we also must recognize that this is a public policy that we're making. So for example, if we just yank HTA out and put another name, whatever name you want to put it in, we need to recognize that there's already an existing infrastructure. And in the world of business, those networking and those infrastructure are very important. And it takes time to cultivate those relationships. So having said that, I think that there can be a lot of better efforts made on the part of HTA in the board of directors. I see in the board of directors,
Let me stop you for a second.
Okay.
I want to give Natalia Hussey-Burdick a chance
Okay.
to respond to this question about, you know, what do you think HTA should be doing, or what should the state be doing about tourism? I mean, do you feel like the state's role should not be selling Hawaii? Mm-hmm. Go ahead, what do you think about that?
Absolutely. So I think that their primary duty should be destination management in terms of like, what's the app that you use to register at a certain park or something like that. But I do think a certain amount of marketing is necessary for good destination management. You want to be marketing to the resort visitor, like he was saying, or you want to be marketing to strategic marketing to certain
golfers.
Yeah. And you want to be marketing and spelling out a mission of when you're here, you need to be respectful of our culture and our environment when you get here.
I think that, John, you would answer that question that we're already doing as much as we can of that. I want to read one more question, an anonymous question. HTA should be abolished. They advertise to bring people here that don't value the islands. Please preserve the islands. What are the current efforts that you're making to manage tourism in that way?
You know, keep in mind, HTA doesn't have a hotel room to sell and air seat to sell, right? What we offer relative to what Keith described is our ability to message to the world Hawaii that is much more multifaceted, multidimensional. For more than a century, we've been marketed as a playground only. And to a certain extent, it'll always be a playground. But there's so much more that we have evolved as not only a Native Hawaiian cultural dimension of it, but the multicultures of Hawaii have become a part of an authentic experience that people are seeking. And so part of our work in destination management is to advance better systems, get real-time information out to visitors so that they can make real-time decisions. In order to do that, we're having to work across agencies with DLNR in particular.
The land department.
Yeah, and so part of it also is being able to build capacity within the communities. There are small businesses, there are festivals, there are events that are very much a part of the visitor experience and community experience, and HTA is involved in all of those areas as we speak.
Let me ask you this way. Are you mass marketing at all?
No.
Should they be mass marketing?
No.
So
Nobody believes we should be
No.
just automatically growing visitor counts. We should be growing visitor spending. And when we said 150 million, they probably give 50 million to the various events that go on. And that's why people want to come. I want to go to the event. They want, when you go to KCC on Saturdays and go to the farmer's market, it's mostly visitors trying all these different foods. The Food and Wine Festival was done to drive visitors in September because after the summer lull. So we think it needs to be a multifaceted effort. But also, please keep in mind that $24 billion in spending, almost $3 billion in taxes. Where's that coming from if we don't have a plan to manage and grow visitor spending?
let me ask, there's a question that came from Kauaika. State doesn't open enough points of interest that would serve both locals and tourists and take pressures off crowded areas. The example they're using is why not open Paradise Park, for example. Your thoughts on that? Are there, as you're just saying, are there enough places like that? Or is that something for you to encourage?
Well, let me say this. The decision as to whether you open Paradise Park or not, at the heart of it is a community wanting that open, right? And so communities today are not going to be spectators to their own future, nor should we be. And that's why the greater community voices that are emerging right now are really important in being able to shape the kind of tourism that we want. At the same time, to Keith's point, we have refined this industry over time to a point where people from around the world are looking to Hawaii, believing that we are at the forefront of this. HTA, when it adopted its new strategic plan in January of 2020, had to become as big a community advocate as it is an industry advocate. And oftentimes that becomes a very delicate balance to achieve, but frankly, that's the dynamism you want to get to a new level.
I have another thought that I want to bounce off of you folks, and I'm going to bring up this question, but Natalia Hasibernik, is how is the legislature doing, how is the state doing at managing the flow of tourists to these various areas? Is there a lot of that where they're saying, okay, here's a park, we want a thing, and there is a license idea that used to be the green fee that's been changed. How might something like that be a management tool? And describe what it is as it stands today, the green fee.
Mm-hmm. Right, so to answer your first question, there's almost none of that going on as far as we can tell.
Hanama Bay might be the one.
Right, yeah. So there's like
Well
specific
done.
areas that have a little bit of management and reservation systems happening. And that's what we kind of want to duplicate across the islands. And the SB 304, the visitor impact fee, is one way to get the funding that we need, because it's frankly not HTA's current mandate to provide these kinds of services. Chapter 201B, that the statutory guidelines for HTA, dictates that they have to do marketing. It doesn't say anything about destination management. So they've done a really good job at fulfilling their mandate, and then they've gone above and beyond that to do the destination management action plans with a lot of input from different communities on different islands. So I give them a lot of credit for that, but that's part of the reason that we want to change the statute to help support that above and beyond when President
I don't
DeVries is
fully
here.
agree. If you look, I don't fully agree that it doesn't part of their job, because if you look at the mandate, it talks about vision and direction, and they're supposed to work with the Department of Transportation, Department of Airports, and so that there is a coordinated plan going forward. Now, they were never ever given the power to do it.
Or the funding.
Well, or the funding. So that becomes a challenge going forward, is if you're going to have somebody be able to set that up, then you need to do it. Now, the industry is adamantly against a fee, a general green fee, because there are many people who aren't going hiking, who aren't going biking, who aren't going to do those things, and those that do go are willing to pay. So let's charge them. And also, it's easier to direct money when you collect it at Diamond Head Trail and then keep it there, as opposed to the legislature eventually sweeping it all up and it goes in the general fund.
You know, James, you're actually kind of a political person. You've watched a lot of politics. Do you think HTA is sort of being almost unfairly scapegoated for the problems we have with the industry, when in actuality we have lots of interrelated regulatory things and jurisdictions that aren't doing anything that they should be doing about it?
Well, actually, upon further thinking about this issue, I feel that this is just a little bit of, remember the defund the police movement, where everybody wanted to defund the police, and then some states did it, but they're actually coming back to fund the police because that was such a hasty decision. And in our estimation, this issue really ought to demand more time and more broader participation, especially the residents. The residents of Hawaii has got to have a few seats at the table. And right now, this morning, I think they passed through HB 1375, and it's a very top-heavy idea. Is that the governor will choose 4 board members, the House Speaker will choose 2, I think the Senate person will choose 2. So again, it is so top-heavy, it's so insular. But the problem really is that it's the grassroots people who have to be happy and who have to buy into it. But if the grassroots people don't have a seat at the table, this problem is not going to get solved, whatever name you come up with or whatever. So I think there were also like 3 legislators from the Big Island, I think, who actually came up with a bill to say, let's study this and come back. And in my opinion, and some other people were talking to, that we really need to go through this again and see, HTA, can HTA do it? Can HTA improve enough? If not, then let's get somebody else. But to just yank the infrastructure in so quick a time, I think that's a very risky proposition.
Let me. Something that Keith said provoked something in me, and there's a number of questions. A lot of these questions come in saying, dissolve the HTA. HTA should be abolished. Hotel corporations have enough money to do their own advertising. That's Kavika from the Big Island. Dissolve HTA and use the money to build and improve bathrooms, facilities, signage, etc. That's John from Kauai. Can the HTA oversee hotel management so that the guests behave? That's Cindy in Waikiki. Keep the tourists out of residential areas. That's what's making everyone upset. Hawaii Kai. I mean, in order for you to do all these things, you'd have to have so much power. Like, you'd have to be the central authority of so many things. Is that even a reasonable expectation?
No,
that
and
people
most
have?
of those things you don't want to do. I mean, go and get in a room in Waikiki and look down what's going on the beach. Those are not visitors. Those are homeless people that are going crazy on the beach. So, I mean, should we be managing people paying and where they go and the time? Absolutely. But visitors are an integral part, and I think the fact that they can, you got 10 people that called in. What about the other 1.3 million that many of them realize, this is my livelihood? 220,000 people, direct and indirect, work in the industry. When you look at the taxes of the $3 billion, where is that coming from?
But I guess what is HTA the industry?
Well, if you take away what happened with that mess with CNHA and the HVCB and Mike McCartney jumping in, and that was a mess. And they got unfairly taken advantage of with that. Now, there's things that got to change. They got to change that board and put people who have knowledge about the industry, business knowledge, and community members. And not activists, but community members that have a broad understanding. Kailua doesn't like a lot of visitors there, but there's a lot of businesses in Kailua that want the visitor money. Okay, how do we manage that so that it works? You manage it through parking, you manage it through not allowing buses. There's ways to do this, but I guess they can do the job.
Right, well, that's what I'm asking. Is HTA in a position to control that grassroots level of activity?
At the moment, we don't have enough authority over those areas, right? And I think that's the point we're talking about here. And that's why leaving HTA where it is right now, convening a study of what model could best serve, not managing what we have today, but managing us into the future, I think is the prudent approach to take, which is why UHERO issued an updated report to that effect just yesterday.
Now, the expectations are from the questions we're getting, the expectations of HTA are extremely high, but I think that the expectations actually fall on local governments and the legislature. I mean, do you feel that way, Natalia Hasiburdik, that indeed it's the legislature and the councils and the mayors and the governors that have actually fallen short of managing this as opposed to HTA?
Absolutely, and it is a collaboration between so many different agencies and departments who are so often burdened with too much kuleana and not enough funding to take care of it. So you had asked a couple times if HTA is getting a bad rap, and I do think they are getting a little bit of a bad rap due to maybe some of the presidents before Mr. DeFries came on. He was put on in the middle of a pandemic and was basically told, here, deal with this, fix it. And he did a great job, immediately shifted towards destination management, immediately took grassroots community action in all of the counties and asked, what does destination management look like to you guys here? And he has been doing his best to try to implement those plans, and again, with not enough funding or actual power to get those done. So a lot of the conversation at the legislature is how do we shift things around to actually support that work and help it.
What's striking me about that comment, though, is that you're essentially just putting a different name on the same animal. Let's have another board, but we're going to have it in DBED instead of have it quasi-governmental, when in fact they're going to be asking another group of people to do essentially the same thing.
So I think that's actually a core difference of what we're asking them to do, a completely different thing. We're asking them to drop marketing as their main kuleana and to take on destination management, which it seems like they're trying to do more of, but frankly is not supported by their guiding statute right now.
Let me ask
that scares the heck out of industry.
Well, I was just
because what happens when there's a dive? What was unique is that every major disaster we had, 9/11 probably the most recent, but previous to that there were United strikes, there were other dock strikes, and I remember being in Cayetano's office where a Waimanalo service station guy said, oh my, when 9/11 happened, because we went from 30,000 arrivals a day to none. And he was saying, I never realized that all the people filling gas at my station are workers or tourists. So how do you better manage that? Now, people would get together and say, we got to find a way to bring tourists back. Now, clearly the message was there. How do we bring them back?
Go ahead.
I want to be very clear that destination management does not mean get rid of the tourism industry. It means how do we keep it at a sustainable level, and how do we prevent things like that from happening?
All I'm saying is you have to do marketing along the way with that. I'm not disagreeing with you.
Which
I'm
is
just saying
be part
you
of
have
it.
to be marketing in your message.
Strategic marketing to certain markets with a certain message is part of it.
It's a little broader than that. But
so Keith, let me ask, and John, you can pitch in on this, is that every single one of the bigger industries, the airlines, the hotel resorts, the coordinated industry, restaurant industry, many groups of industries have their own incentive to advertise, right? And why is it that they can't do their own advertising? Why do you need a government-funded entity to do that advertising?
Because we rely on the distribution system. Who's going to help Pleasant, Costco, all these other entities market? They'll just say, I'll just market Mexico, because they give us a significant partnership marketing to do something. So we have got to support our partners. In addition to that, there has to be destination marketing. You know, it's not about come and stay at the Sheraton Waikiki. That's not the point. Come and enjoy Hawaii's farmers. Come and enjoy the food. Come and enjoy the different things we have, our chefs, Pacific Rim chefs, etc. That's got to be marketing done by them. Who's going to fund all the festivals that go on? Who's going to fund the Sony Open? You got to have that. Now, I don't think it should be mass marketing. Nobody ever wanted mass marketing. We want targeted, rifle approach to high-spending visitors.
You know, right now the brand is the Hawaiian Islands, right? And what you want is a state entity who can come at this from a neutral standpoint, because if the private sector were left to just brand, this could look very hodgepodge and disjointed, right? And so our ability to establish a brand that we message, that we're proud of, that plays to a world market, but plays as well to a community, because it's a reflection of the voices in the community. That establishes a brand around which these co-op marketing campaigns, airlines, hotels can engage in their own marketing efforts.
Do you coordinate that much with the industry?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Well, and through their vendors, through HVCP or the different vendors.
Jim, what do you think the brand should be for Hawaii?
Well, welcome to Hawaii. But again, going back to some of the issues here, to me, HTA is not the silver bullet to the residents' concern. Mm-hmm. So welcome to Hawaii, you know, understand the culture, have a good time, find peace and happiness, whatever it is. The bottom line is still the residents. We want to put the residents first. And you know, in that sense, there is room for improvement with HTA, or even with the infrastructure that the bills are coming up. But the idea is that we have to put the residents first, and even then, we really ought to respect home rule. If Kauai wants to treat tourism their own way, they ought to have the right to do that in Kauai. If Big Island wants to do that, or Molokai, or Kauai, you know, whatever it is, there ought to be just more
as long
community,
as it's majority of the people,
grassroots,
and not the minority activist groups. That's all I'm saying with that, because you're right, they should have input, but there are still 40% of the people in the state who work have a tie-in to tourism. So
I understand that.
They need, you know, you got to be fair and you got to listen to everybody.
Right, understand that. You know, the activists also represent a lot of the grassroots people who are too busy working. There are actually people who work in the hotel industry or in the tourist industry who are saying, you know, this is getting so out
Let me
of
throw this
control.
question that came in, and I'm afraid I've got to, okay, here. It was here somewhere. Casey on Facebook. Tourism mostly produces low-paying service jobs where people cannot even afford to pay for rent. Who is actually benefiting from HTA and this over-tourism? Why aren't we diversifying the economy? You know, along that line, I mean,
That's a good
is
point.
there a role of HTA
What
in
do you
saying
think?
maybe it should be a smaller part of our
What
economy?
do you think the average hotel worker, full-time worker, not a part-timer, full-time worker in a union hotel makes? Wages and benefits. I just got this last week. What do you think they make?
Well, probably $40 an hour.
That's a total salary for the year.
Oh, in a year? 60,000.
96,000.
That's
If
with
you add-
benefits?
That's with benefits.
No, that's unionized hotel workers.
Yes, but everybody's
Everybody's being competitive.
Everybody follows that. Now, they may not get all the benefits that unionized
But
workers
all
get,
the small businesses and going down.
No, I'm
the
talking
line-
hotels.
I know. So, I mean, in terms of the.
And
I
if
mean,
you add tips, Darryl, it's 120,000. Not low paying. Now, they work their ass off. They probably deserve more than what they're getting. But, you know, everybody always says low paying. It is not that low paying like you think.
But we don't have an economy right now that's able to afford housing.
So give me a business that you think we should grow.
Television.
Yeah, film
I agree.
Film industry, artificial intelligence.
Absolutely. What does the
stocks.
film business do? It drives visitors because they see these movies and different things, so they want to come.
Well,
I
let's
agree
say
with you
tech.
100%.
Let's say tech. I mean, should HTA, for
We
example...
can't even get basic tech
Let me
done
just,
in this
but
thing.
again, is it HTA's role, I know this is a crazy question, is it HTA's role to say, here is the appropriate size, proportion of the economy that should be tourism?
No.
Whose role is that?
That's the government's role.
No, and I think in front of you, what you have are resident sentiments, right? And resident sentiments being healthy toward tourism is everybody's responsibility. Everyone at the state capitol, right? Because the scale at which we do this industry and the revenues that are derived is what drives it, right? The $2.2 billion in state tax revenue is the equivalent of our public education system budget, right? So HTA gets pointed at, and rightfully so. I don't have a problem with that. But the responsibility of improving resident attitudes toward tourism is related to how we manage destinations, how we listen to communities,
Right.
and begin to do this. And that's why I made the point earlier. HTA, with its new strategic plan in January 2020, had to become as big a community advocate as it is an industry advocate. And that's a rare combination, but it's an important one to keep.
Since we've circled back again to HTA as an agency, right, in this conversation, it seems we've talked about how different jurisdictions could be managing at their own level. Should the expectations of HTA be reduced as opposed to expanded? You know, so that you're
I think it should
more
be
focused.
clear.
Okay. So
I mean, the reason that we were given, when we started the HTA, we were given the procurement bypass, so to speak, was so we didn't have messes that went on with this contract they just did. What happened? DBED took it back, and all of a sudden, Mike McCartney is in charge of that. That's wrong. You should have had experts on the group making a decision, and that decision should stand. You know, we may not be happy with the decision, but it should stand. So HTA just needs to be clearer on what they're expected to do, and they also need to do is be able to pull together government agencies and either agree or not agree. And the local residents have to have a say in that.
one of the things that did happen, though, too, to put in the right context that recent issue was the legislature changed the rules for HTA, right? Can you describe, Natalia, how well, you weren't there, you're a freshman, but they did pretty dramatically change the level of autonomy HTA had.
Yeah, it was before my time, but as I understand it, they only recently made them have to adhere by the procurement code, which the procurement code is frankly very difficult to abide by. It has a lot of steps. And so they made a mistake big time. You know, this new, no, the HTA, when they were trying to follow these new rules that they've never had to abide by before, they, you know, missed a step.
But do you think do you think that HTA should be free of rules like that?
I think as a state-funded agency, they should have to abide by our procurement code and increase transparency.
How do you feel about that?
Well, I should add that before HB 862, HTA had a procurement policy.
You know, I should explain to the viewers what the procurement is.
Yeah, well,
because we throw the word around like we throw around infrastructure.
No, here's the, okay. What we need is a dedicated source of funding, right? TAT, a tourism special fund that is overseen by a board. And those two things first would make us much more mobile and effective. If we earn the confidence of getting the procurement exemption back, that would complete the deck.
Yeah, the rules for procurement that are so difficult is you while you're trying to do a contract, you can't talk to each other, you can't talk to the procurement people, you can't let the public know what's going on. There's all these rules that basically trap you into a place where no one's communicating or being flexible.
Yeah, but let me emphasize, we're talking about public money, right? And so there needs to be that type of discipline placed on it right now. You can achieve that discipline even with a procurement exemption and have a transparent process. So, but frankly, when you're dealing with public money, I have no problem with a procurement policy that's rigid, but it would help us if we had the exemption, because had we had the exemption, we would not have had the problem that we had. The final call on the RFP would have been mine.
Exemption from the state procurement
Correct.
code. Okay, so I've got, we get back, go ahead.
No, he said that HTA's mission has to be clear, and I want to add that it needs a paradigm shift as well. It needs to focus more on the residents, on the natural resources of Hawaii. Even with the recent legislation, you look at the notes, it's very top heavy and it's very government controlled. And that's not going to solve the problem. It's the people, it's the county rule, it's just being open. So, it's just not a business thing. It's not about the hotel, it's not about the airlines, it's not about the retail. It has got to have a paradigm shift and allow the biggest stakeholders, and that's the residents. You got to put the residents first, and then you can work with everyone else. You guys cannot do everything, but you can do a lot of good stuff. I'm
going to really quickly run through some of these questions. They're coming in fast and furious.
Part of the reason Keith and I are in this industry is we come from the community. and felt that we could shape the industry during the course of our professional life.
Well, and you guys did well. I want to just say I have a response to this conversation about the quality of life of hotel workers. It says tourism is okay for the hotel workers, but hotel workers are still living with their parents and can't afford the cost of living here. This is George from Maui. I'm in the tourism industry, and I think it's still too much. Keith, I'll just ask you, are we too dependent on tourism?
Probably. But we are the most expensive place to live.
Yeah.
We have a limited land. We are we're the highest unionized state in the country, and all these barriers to entry. When the pandemic started, IGE put together that economic council, and they came out with two things. Let's grow breadfruit and let's grow broadband. And it was disbanded not long after that, because what an absolute waste of time. What if we took tourism and we said, why don't we grow agritourism? Why don't we grow, farmers having a chance to share their product and knowledge, if they want it, not everybody. Waipio taro farmers, maybe they would like to show people what they do, and then people would pay them money and stay there. And what if we grew what we do so well and actually manage that so everybody gets a share? Not just the people.
We've been talking
Absolutely.
about that.
What happened during the pandemic? We didn't even do the things she was asking for.
Well, that was one of the good questions I have in this huge pile. Is we had the pandemic and everybody said we needed to do something.
We didn't set up other than Hanauma Bay, which was already set up before that. We didn't set up one entity. I think maybe Diamond Head Trail. They should have just been done. Kauai did it.
Yeah.
And everybody should have done. What is the plan for your
scale?
Yes,
it,
absolutely.
Right? Natalia, Hasiberti, what is the legislature doing in that area of, let's identify how much of our economy we want to have tourism and let's find something else?
Diversifying the economy and growing different sectors is absolutely been a priority of the legislature for years. I do just want to acknowledge that the person who said that they were struggling while working in the visitor industry, people having to live with their parents, that is not exclusive to the visitor industry. That is in every industry that I know of. I worked at the legislature before this, and I had to get a second job in the visitor industry in order to make ends meet. So most people that I know work 2 or 3 jobs just to get by.
Just for full disclosure, I wouldn't be here if it weren't for tourism marketing. My dad that was his business, So,
Darryl, let me add one point. I think too that we need to start looking at tourism as a driver of economic diversification, not the antithesis.
Is that a role for HTA?
No, well, very much, because frankly, 35 years ago, a handful of chefs decided to commit to Hawaii regional cuisine. The minute they did that, they altered the way local farmers looked at the opportunity, local fishermen, and local ranchers, right? And how that grew to the degree that we now have the Food and Wine Festival and the great work that Denise Yamaguchi's been doing to build that, right? The reason we have some of the top architectural firms in the world is they cut their teeth on the resorts, right? So to a certain extent, we have examples of that diversification. We just need to get better at it. And
that's a Manaola shirt. This is a Manaola shirt. We took Manaola to Tahiti, and our owners in Tahiti now are looking at how they can incorporate their designs into that. That's what we should be exporting. All these things that we do.
Made in Hawaii products, yeah.
Well, I think that's been sort of the vision that they've been talking about quite a bit at the legislature is, can we use our platforms, our digital platforms that you have to use to get to a park to pay that fee to also market products to people who are now used to buying things. Do you see hope in that? You're a young person, you know, the youngest here. Do you see hope in that kind of thinking?
Absolutely. I think we just need to embrace technology a little bit more, and we need to actually assign people to do those jobs and not just think that, you know, each agency is going to come up with it themselves. We need to actually invest in technology development and create a new industry in that sense.
Look at the artisans, opportunity with artisans. I was at Nohea Gallery today, and one of these guys that I was sending it for a housewarming gift. But when you look at what that can be, if we had an automatic, simple system on how it's sent, it gets there like they do in many European countries when you're buying wine. Man, we could export what these artisans are doing. That's a form of tourism. But
well, you look at what's going on with the Merry Monarchs coming up in a week or so. Joe, do you have hope? When you hear all this discussion, do you think people are actually thinking differently and thinking creatively finally?
Well, I always have hope. That's why we've been involved in grassroots politics for so long. But I think we need to be pragmatic and practical that, yes, we need tourism, but we also need to really create other industry. For example, South Korea, they invested in their people's human capital. They help with their film industry and in the music industry. And look, Korean music and Korean drama is taking over the whole world. And you know, on top of on top of that, there are so many successful people actually on our islands who are doing really good non-tourist industry, and those really ought to be supported more. And sometimes government has got to step aside and not place too much red tape on enterprising, you know, entrepreneurship as well.
John DeFries, you know, really another question. Keep the tourists in Waikiki, and you know, let us be on our beaches. Is HTA sort of on the ropes right now in terms of finding its footing and the places it needs to be? How close are you to being able to resuscitate that role?
In the creation of the Destination Management Action Plans, each island has a core steering committee made up of diverse members from industry and the community, right? It's not the complete solution, but it is the start. And what we need, and they've identified the hot spots, the troubled areas, the opportunities to grow small businesses. What we need is the funding and the resources and the staffing to be able to implement at an accelerated rate. But I feel very strongly about the work that we've accomplished in the last 2.5 years. And I'm concerned about the fact that changing directions abruptly like this, keep in mind the Senate just approved 5 of the 12 board members that serve on HTA.
It's all going on to 4 years. They're talking about giving you all this considerable money. They're putting people on your board, and they're talking about dissolving you. So let me, Natalia Hausiberg, to round us out here, we've got about a minute and a half. What do you expect will be the product of the legislature in terms of HTA and tourism funding?
So that's the funny part about the legislature, right, is we have so many diverse opinions involved that we are often, you know, speaking out of both sides of our mouths or doing 2 completely different things. This is a huge idea that really has only been thought about at the legislature for the last couple of years. So I don't know if it's realistic to expect that we're going to make this change this year, But I do know, at least in the House, with our whole new dedicated tourism committee chaired by Representative Sean Quinlan, who's a member of the North Shore community who is extremely negatively impacted by tourism. I know that he's made it a priority to work on this, and I fully support that, and just change the direction of this ship, which has gone so far off the rails.
But it kind of sounds like reading between the lines, what you're saying is that despite the fact that both houses have passed these things and so on, nothing's really going to change.
Well, nobody ever knows what's going to come out of conference committee.
Okay, all right. Okay,
but
well,
it'll change eventually. I don't know about this year.
Maybe not this year. Okay. Well, thank you so much. And mahalo to you folks at home for joining us tonight. And we want to thank our guests, President and CEO of the Hawaiʻi Tourism Authority, John DeFries, and North Shore resident, June James, and Representative Natalia Hussey-Burdick and Keith Vieira from KV & Associates Hospitality Consulting. Next week on Insights, we're talking about hikers who break the rules and whether they should pay for it if they need to be rescued. Please join us then. I'm Daryl Huff for Insights on PBS Hawaii. Aloha.